Hello and welcome to my channel Vibrant Vibes, the channel where we color things together, kind of like Bob Ross with painting, but only with alcohol markers. In this video, we will be coloring in Shrek from Shrek. And I've actually just finished, so we'll go ahead and rewind and we'll go through step by step on how I color this. Feel free to follow along with your own markers or just sit back and enjoy the ride. Let me know what you think in the comment section. If you have any ways to improve my video, I would really love to know. But I hope you enjoy, so thank you so much for watching. Hello and welcome to Vibrant Vibes. In this episode we are going to be coloring in Shrek, and what I've done so far is I have selected my palette for the fire. So I'm going to start with the fire because it's probably the most difficult part, and if I'm going to spend a lot of time on this drawing and I'm going to mess up, I'm probably going to mess up on the fire, so let's just get it out of the way, make sure I do it okay. And then we'll work our way to the other parts of the background, like the sky. Then we'll go to the tiles, castle, dragon, and then we'll come to the main characters up front. So what I'm going to do is start with my lightest color, as always, and just getting it started, getting the paper wet. Now, when you're doing a drawing, you know, I'll talk a lot about like wet paper and how you're kind of like mixing the ink on the paper itself. You're going to want the ink to be wet, and as soon as the ink hits the paper, it's going to start to dry. I don't know exactly how long it takes to dry. It's not like it just goes from like 0 to 100 just like that. It does fade as far as the drying goes. But like the amount of area that you work with is really important. So it's going to take me, so all this fire area will probably take me, I don't know, a minute or two just to color in, because I have to get in between here, between Donkey and stuff, and it's just a large surface area. So by the time I finish coloring in one layer, the beginning where I started up here will probably be dry. So it's going to just require me to go over it a few more times than I normally would on a smaller area, before I start mixing in the darker colors. So right now we're just kind of putting down this lightest yellow of mine. Now I tend to use the light colors a lot more than I use the dark colors, and you can tell because this marker is running out. But that's okay. This is probably, I generally start a little bit lighter than I'm going to end up finishing. Like in most of my drawings, like I might use, the final result of this might look something more like this third yellow as opposed to this first one. But like the lighter colors can't really hurt, and just by getting the paper wet, I'm kind of creating myself like a little tool, like a mixing tool that I can use later for these darker colors. Like I said, I've never done fire before, so we're going to kind of learn together. But I think this should be a lot of fun. So let's call it good for this color. I'll go to my third one here. And I think I'm actually just going to do the entire thing. Maybe I'll avoid this area. Yeah, you know, it's lighter colors are tough with markers compared to darker markers. With lighter colors, it's less forgiving. If you make a mistake or you accidentally go a little too dark, you can go a little bit lighter, but you can only go so much lighter, and it's kind of difficult, and it requires the paper to be pretty wet in order to go lighter. So we start light and we finish dark, and that will allow us, as we apply more and more layers of the lighter, and as we start light and we go darker, we're applying more and more layers. With each layer, the paper gets a little bit more damp, and when it's more damp, it's just safer to add the dark colors. So usually those first few layers that you put down, you barely even see at the end. But you're just getting the paper wet, you're kind of establishing some shadows and some mixture of different colors, trying to avoid being monotone. Like right now I'm going pretty monotone, but I don't really think we're going to see this. We will see this yellow, actually. I'm going to try to keep this yellow, out there, because I did like this light yellow, but my marker was kind of running out, and it's tricky to keep it light. Like if you're starting out, I suggest starting with darker pictures, as opposed to really light ones. It's just, It's just so much easier. It really, really is. Oops, I went over this part, but that's okay. Now, it's important to know kind of like what your surroundings are going to be like. So, there's a good chance that I might cross over a line here. Like if I just went over Shrek's head a little bit. But that's okay, because I know that's going to be green. Kind of like a yellowish green. So that's okay to go over. Obviously, it's ideal not to. But it's important to be aware of your surroundings. Like, if I'm doing a face, and I'm kind of working around an eyeball a little bit, I'm going to be extra careful, because not only eyes are kind of draw your attention like at first glance when the picture's all done, but they're white, and it's easy to put down too much ink around the eyes and have it kind of bleed through the lines into the eyes. So that's what happens if you put down too much ink. It can actually start to kind of bleed. So you have to, there's a happy balance. There's a happy medium for how wet you want the paper to be. If it's too dry, it's hard to blend. If it's too wet, it starts to bleed. So with a large, and that will kind of depend on the surface area that you're working with. So right now I'm working with a larger surface area, and it's just taking me a little bit longer to fill all this stuff in. So I'm not too worried about bleeding. I'm more worried about it drying up too fast on me. But I don't think it's going to be much of an issue. And it doesn't have to be wet to add the darker colors. Okay, it just makes it easier to blend. And, depending on the application, it might not even matter. Okay, so I got a picture of fire up on my screen. You can't see it. But it's kind of hard to tell what's going on. I'm just going to kind of do some squigglies here. And we'll just see how it goes. I might just try doing the squiggly technique with a lot of this. And because I'm kind of looking at the fire, and it's just so chaotic. I mean, like the oranges and the yellows mixing together. There's not too much red, but I've got this last marker, and I might mix that in. But by the time I mix this in, the paper should be pretty wet, and it won't dominate as much as it's dominating on this palette right here. Or on my paper, I should say. All right. Try that. So I'm just like doing like little kind of chaotic little squigglies and stuff. And I'm going to try doing that with everything, and that will at least mix up the colors. So I'll have like a lot of overlaps between the different markers, but it's a little chaotic, so there's really not going to be like a pattern to it or like any sort of shading techniques done. It's just kind of bits and pieces. But I'm starting light. Like I said, I start light and I finish dark. So we're experimenting. If you're watching this, hopefully it turns out all right. If you're not watching it, chances are I ripped it up and threw it away. I do that sometimes. And then as far as my markers go, like I got all my markers laid out here. Oops. A little off screen. And I keep them in the same order as I keep in the palette. And then when I grab, like let's say I was going to grab this marker, I would kind of keep a gap here. And then that way I know exactly which marker I'm pulling. And I can put it right back into this in the same order. Because with this many markers, it's pretty easy to get a little mixed up here. Go a little bit darker again. Don't forget, it's easy. Oops, see, I went over his face a little bit. It's easy to. I forget what I was going to say. Oh yeah, it's kind of easy to like forget like the border, like right here. I'm kind of working this border as if it were crossing over. I just want to make sure that I treat all the area equally, so that it doesn't look like they're all done completely separate, and just want to make sure that I'm staying consistent regardless of what's going on in the background or in the foreground. Keep adding this. I think this technique might look all right. Yeah, because the fire is just so chaotic. It comes with all sorts of different colors and whatnot. And I kind of like the ink drying up on me a little bit. Basically, if the ink dries up on you, it will leave, and I add a darker color, it will leave more of like a line. Whereas if the paper's really wet and I put down a darker color, it will just kind of blur into it and it'll kind of fade. It'll just kind of fade on its own. So that's kind of the advantage of wet paper. Is it helps you blend a lot, but you don't necessarily always want it to blend. Sometimes you do want that line. Like if it's like you got one very strict light source and it's clearly a shadow. That shadow will be sharp. I don't know what this is going to look like. Alright, now we're getting into our more reddish colors, orangish colors. Some things are really easy to do with marker, and some things are really difficult, and I think this fire is going to be very difficult. Not saying it'd be any easier with like paint or anything, but I just think the fire in general is going to be pretty tricky to pull off. So the brighter the hotter the fire is, I think it's kind of like more a little bit brighter the hotter it is, and it's gonna be hottest over here. So I'm gonna try to keep that part a little bit lighter relative to everything else. Okay, I got there's a very light orange going right now. We're just gonna keep working our way up. Just chaotic right now. And the fire's all over the place. There's no rhyme or reason to this fire. Alright, this marker's brand new. I can tell the marker's kind of new because the felt tip is pretty hard and sharp. I love it. I love a new marker. So I haven't really used this marker in the past. Or I used it a bunch and just replaced it and don't remember. Either one. But I always like to use the felt tip. I mean, 90% of the time I'm using the felt tip. It's sharp enough at the end that I can still get a nice fine line. But it's also it's the best for applying ink, adding lots of ink at once. And it's the best for just blending everything together, in my opinion. There is the chisel tip on the other end of the marker. And the chisel tip is more for like pushing ink, kind of like driving your ink in. So it's actually good for going lighter, the chisel tip is. You can kind of push those darker colors out of the way. Alright, here we're going a little bit more orange. So now, as we start to add the darker colors, you gotta be a little bit more careful, because in the final result, these darker colors are really gonna stick out a lot. And they really can, just a little bit of ink goes a very, very long way with these darker colors. So I just, like, as you progress in a certain area and you get darker and darker, you gotta start paying a little bit more attention, and it's a little bit harder to correct mistakes. At the beginning, it's easy if you make a mistake, because you can cover up a mistake with a darker color. But now that we're getting into these these darker colors that stand out a little bit more, they're just a little bit less forgiving. But since we have wet paper, if I do add a color that I don't really like a darker color, on wet paper, on wet ink, you can kind of come back to a lighter color and kind of blend it back in and actually make it a little bit lighter. But you can't really do that on dry paper. So for the millionth time, wet paper is our friend. Now we're getting really orange. Chaotic. And how much do I want it to blend together? Because Another trick you can do is kind of look at the back side of the paper, and you can kind of see how wet it is, and you can actually feel it. I don't want to oversaturate because I don't want it bleeding through the lines. You know, but sometimes, you know, especially if I were working on a smaller area right here, it might almost be beneficial to step away for like a minute or two, or maybe work on a different area and let the ink dry a little bit. That can actually work to your advantage, I think. I've never set up a timer for like how long the ink takes to dry. Maybe that's something I should do sometime, so I have a better idea. But I would guess like each layer adds an additional minute of drying time, if I had to guess. Alright, now we're really getting to the dark, so now it's kind of do or die time. If you're watching this, chances are it turned out alright. And these oranges. Careful of my foreground, not to cross those lines. Especially with the orange. Orange does not blend in with the green of Shrek and anything like that. So just gotta be careful. And like with this fire, you gotta keep in mind, like, sure, maybe if I zoom in on this one tiny section, it doesn't look all that great. But like from a glimpse, like from a distance, does it look like a fire? All right, now we're going real dark. All right, this one I'm gonna be extra careful with. Maybe just kind of reverse highlight some of those oranges I just added. You know, keep this near some of the other dark colors so they kind of look like they go together a little bit. Because this orange is very dark. So I don't want this to kind of dominate everything. Just little bits here and there. This color will stand out quite a bit compared to the other ones. Now normally I go light, dark, light, slightly darker, then lighter. And every time you add a darker marker, you revisit those lighter markers to kind of blend it all in. Well, I haven't done that here. You know, this is kind of a different style. I'm not really blending everything together as if I were doing like a sphere or like a cylinder or something like that. Yeah, that one really dominated. And we'll come to this red over, this kind of reddish orangish one. This one really stands out a lot, so I'm just gonna do it lightly. I think a little bit of this one can come a long way. We can always add more, so what I'll probably do is revisit my lighter colors after this, and then I'll probably come back to these really darker colors as well. I don't know what that looks like. All right, let's come back to Y1. And maybe try to blend in some of this. Just, again, just kind of chaotic. And we're going to blend in with a lot of different markers, but just keeping it chaotic still. You want to make sure, so like right now I'm using printer paper, but it's 60-pound printer paper. It's not 20-pound, your normal 20-pound. If you use 20-pound printer paper, it's just too thin, and it's hard to, it requires less ink, but it's harder to kind of blend things because the paper gets saturated so quickly. So I recommend like a medium weight paper, something that's really smooth and non-porous. So this 60-pound paper has worked really, really well for me. Also, sometimes like the ink from the printer can kind of smear. So that kind of depends on your printer ink and your the paper that you're using. So I find that this ink, for some reason, smears on like every other type of paper that I have. But for some reason, it doesn't really smear on with this, which is really nice. So definitely experiment with different types of paper. I think like if you go like 120 or like anything over 100, I think that's just too much. So, but yeah, 60 pounds is probably pretty good. I don't know what this looks like, guys. I mean, I might just take a step back and I mean, it kind of looks like fire. That's a little chaotic. A glance. Come with different orange. Maybe try to go over some of these like really dark areas. This is like a moderate, like a light orange. So, but the more I smear it together, the more I lose my highlights, those random highlights. Alright, let's come back in with the light color. This time I'm going to use the chisel tip. Chisel tip just kind of helps me push ink out of the way and create some highlights. It's not as great for blending, but it kind of helps like lighten up the color a little bit. And this is the other reason you want thicker paper, is that I'm actually kind of pushing and this felt tip is kind of rough. So I am, oops, I missed a spot over here. Yeah, I'll make it, okay, that's fine. So if you use like a 20-pound paper with the felt tip, you could actually just rip right through the paper. So I really recommend a thicker paper. Now I've seen some people online that prefer the 20-pound paper, and that's fine. It saves ink. It really does not require as much ink. You just gotta work a little bit quicker if you're gonna try to blend. And it's just less forgiving. You can't make quite as many mistakes because you just can't go over it as many times. Like in my drawings, I tend to start really light, and I'll put down like 5 or 6 layers before I get to the dark colors. But yeah, if you're doing a lighter paper, you might be only put down like 2 or 3 layers before you get to the dark colors. It's okay. Oh, it's so difficult. I don't know. I'm gonna look for any areas that kind of like stick out that maybe look like they don't quite belong quite right. Maybe some of these oranges or these darker oranges are kind of just by themselves. So this is like a lighter orange. I think it's this color right here. And I'm just kind of going in and bringing it all together. Come on. See, I went over Fiona's hair, but her hair is red, fortunately. So I kind of knew that ahead of time. But still, no reason to go over the lines. Just gotta still be careful no matter what the background or foreground is. Okay, we're going darker again. Dark orange. Not the super dark orange yet, but still. Yeah, we have very little of that original yellow left. Come back over with yellow marker. Your yellow markers really become blenders towards the end. Like your light markers become blenders towards the end. I'm I'm really not changing the color here with this marker because it's so much lighter, but it is just kind of blending everything together. I go through these light colors really quickly because I use them as blenders. And then what ends up happening is, in order to replace them, sometimes you have to get an entire set. And then you replace the set just to replace, you might buy like 50 new markers just to essentially get like 10 new markers, and then you're left with 40 duplicates. And then you do this time and time again, and you end up with like 5 duplicates of some markers. That's okay. I think that's pretty good. Let's see, I don't like this. Yeah, I think this last marker that I chose was a little bit too red. So now I'm just trying to work it out with this orangish color. Yeah, see, it's starting to bleed over her arm. And this paper is quite wet. You can actually see her arm right there. Okay, that's pretty good. I'm going to grab a blender marker. I'm going to double check the tip is clean. And I'm going to go, this kind of lines up everything. And kind of blends. So it kind of brings colors together, but it also lines things up. You just gotta be careful because the blender marker tends to leave streaks a little bit and can kind of damage your paper. I'm not exactly sure how it works, but the ink, it's not just like clear ink. It behaves differently. So you gotta experiment with your blender marker a little bit. That's okay. I'll call that good for the fire. Okay, so now the fire is all dry. I want to work on the tiles next. I anticipate them to be kind of this grayish color, but I want to try to do a little bit of reflection with some of these kind of like these orangish, yellowish colors. And I did a little sample over here of this lightest gray. Yeah, this is the lightest gray, and this is supposed to go with these colors. But I've actually used these colors before, and they kind of mix together better than you would think. So what I'm going to do is start light. I'm not really sure what this is totally going to look like, but per usual, we will start light. And I'm just going to get everything wet with this lightest color. So chances are I'm not really even going to see this color at the very end. But we're just going to get started with a lighter color. And we're just, we're starting to get that paper wet so we can have something to blend with. Now, these markers are, you'll notice that they aren't round. So, see how there's two different types of markers? This one is what I was using before, and this has the brush tip, the rounder one, the bigger one. But this one only has a chisel tip, and the chisel tip isn't quite as good for spreading ink. It's good for like pushing ink aside. So if you like really want to like force an area to get lighter, the chisel tip is kind of the way to go. But it just doesn't apply as much ink, so I have to go over it a little bit more. Also, something to be aware of when you're buying these sets is that these thinner markers do have less ink in them, so that you're just going to run out a little bit sooner. And if you're like me, you use the light colors a lot, you end up going through them fairly quickly. Okay, so we got that kind of wet. I'm going to tell you what, let's go in with this next gray. Now this one is a kind of normal marker, a fatter marker, and it does have a brush tip. So I'm going to kind of combine these two colors together for my base. I think this looks a little bit better. And I want to get a couple of layers of ink down before I start throwing in the highlights. So I'll probably go base color, highlights, base color, dark areas. Probably the order that I will go. Let's mix this in one more time with the previous color. Just Getting that paper wet, mixing it all together. See, when I mix the colors together like this, it prevents, even though I'm basically doing the same thing throughout, there are slight variations, and it does give me this non-monotone color. It looks a little spotty, and that's actually a good thing. So I can go really heavy in some areas with this marker, lighter in some areas, maybe even avoid a few areas. We'll come back with that second gray, and like right here, let's say I really want, it's too light, just saturate it right there, and then maybe this tile right here in particular is a little bit darker, and this tile is a little bit darker, and this tile is a little bit darker. So that the base color for these tiles is a little bit different. Let me actually go up one darker color, and let's do that same thing for a couple other tiles. So we're gonna have all the tiles kind of be their own thing, and we're just they'll all be similar, but each one's unique, but they're still obviously very similar because they go together. Pretty good. Yeah, maybe this one too. Alright, let's come back in with a lighter color, that second marker I did, and let's just blend everything together. Because there are some pretty big differences in the colors right now. You can always go darker, but these are kind of the base colors that I've chosen. And you know what? Tell you what. Let's throw in a different type of gray. So these are all warm grays. So I strongly suggest making a swatch for yourself. And if you're interested in these swatches, I can probably put the PDF up online. I haven't done that yet, but maybe check below in the comments in case I have so far. But these are pretty good. I've been using the warm grays, and you know, I've got some other warm grays from Copic. Tell you what, let me throw in. Let's just randomly gray. Let's try a cool gray, and let's just try this on maybe a couple of the tiles. Okay, yeah, I like this cool gray. So we're just doing this for a few of the tiles. We're just making them all a little bit different. Alright, that actually looks pretty good. Alright, let's try some highlights. So I'm going to try this lightest highlight over here. And I'm going to use the brush tip. I was using the chisel. That's pretty good, actually. So I can go like really heavy in certain areas. It's gonna be lighter towards oops. It's gonna be lighter towards the towards the fire, and it'll be darker as you get a little bit closer to the bottom of the page. That looks pretty nice, actually. I'm satisfied with that. All right, so we're just experimenting. The paper's wet, so now we can experiment a little bit with some different highlights. So let's try this one. Oh, that one's got a pretty big tint of yellow. Oh, yeah, that's pretty yellow. But I consider that a mistake, but I've kind of committed to this mistake. It's already there. I've done it twice. Let's do it a third time. Let's do it in this one. And you know what? I'm just going to keep going with that mistake. Let's go. Let's try even another one. And let's do even another one after that. I am committed to this mistake. And we're going to blend this all in. See, I've got different highlight colors. I've got different levels, different colors at different like tier levels. So I've got 3 super light colors, and 3 moderately light colors, and 3 medium colors, and 3 three, moderately dark colors, and 3 dark colors, and you can just kind of mix and match them a little bit as you go, and you kind of bring them all together towards the end. But like this technique helps create like different colors. Like just avoid being monotone. The more colors you can get, you want people to be like, damn, how many markers do you really have? Wow. I'm just kind of going over everything with this orange now. That yellow is a little bit too much. Okay. So now maybe it's a little bit too orange. Let me go over with that base gray again. And the paper's definitely getting very wet right now, which is usually a good thing. It might actually, maybe it's a little too wet. But if you do find your paper being too wet, so you can see through, we can see, I can actually feel it. If you do find your paper getting too wet, you can always step aside for a little bit and just let it dry for a few minutes. All right, let's try WD-160 again. It might be, this might all be too yellow. So I might come in with this slightly darker gray. I've already used this marker once. Okay, now I think I have some good base colors established. Let me come in with that lightest marker. This one that looks like it doesn't belong. And we'll just bring it all together again. Oops, I went off the line. My fault. Bring it all together. Just keep pushing. Slowly bring it back to this original color. Slowly blending everything together. That's pretty good. Alright, it's still a little bit too yellow now. So I'm going to come in, it's still too flat. It doesn't look like there's any cracks in the ground. So I'm going to come in with my second darkest gray. And let's just pick an area that we think most people won't see. Let's go underneath the flame here. And let me try using, let's see. So I'm going to try adding like a little bit of shadow to basically where these lines are. And this should give it a little bit of life, looking like it's standing out a little bit compared to what it is right now. So we just have cracks on the sidewalk. It's uneven. We're on the bridge, not the sidewalk. They're on a bridge right now, aren't they? Oh shoot, that one's a little too much. But the paper's wet, so we can work with wet paper. So right here I want a little too dark. I'm going to come back in a second and try to fix that. Actually looks pretty good. And I might even bring this up a little bit. Maybe like on the far end it's a little bit darker. Kind of like at the bottom of the page. And then we'll try to fade this back in. So it looks like the bricks have a little bit more depth to them. So let's do that. Let's go back to 160. So that was 170, gray 170. And let's just try blending in these areas with this marker. So this 160 marker that I'm using right now is pretty close to the base colors that we have. So I'm just kind of blending it in and trying to get rid of that line that we just established. And then what I can do here is this area was a little bit too dark. I'm basically just using this chisel tip. Oh shoot, I'm starting to damage the paper because it's so wet. But I'm just kind of going over it. Yeah, I gotta be careful here. You see, we can always go darker. We can go a little bit lighter, but not too much lighter. So So you just gotta be careful once you put those darks down. But like at this point, I've already established different colors. I think it's looking pretty good. I'm gonna come in with my darkest color and like really highlight, like reverse highlight the cracks, the bottom part of the cracks. And just a simple line. Usually with the darkest color, all you really need is just like a simple thin line. And that really just makes the other colors pop. I mean, that's the whole purpose of it. Okay, I think that's pretty good. I'll put a line here. And then I'm going to come in with my blender and try to hit some highlight areas. So we'll just go towards the top of the tiles now, because that's where we're going to see our reflections a little bit more. And then the bottoms, we're going to have that darker gray that we just did. And if I go too light with the blender, that's okay. We can always come in with the original marker and make it back to revert it back to the original color. But these highlighters work really, really well, but you can only use them so much. And you really want to use them on wet ink, and you want to they do tend to streak a little bit, so you don't want to concentrate in one area and then work your way out. You kind of want to do the whole thing at once a little bit. And I think that's pretty good for the tiles. So call that there. And then why don't we do the sky and the castle next? Okay, now let's do the sky. So we've done the fire, we've done the tiles. With the sky, what I generally like to do, I like to do a fade. I'll have it be a little bit lighter in the far distance, and then when it gets closer to us, so towards the top of the paper, it'll get a little bit darker towards this. I've selected some grays for the clouds. Now, clouds are tough because like anytime you're dealing with like white colors, light colors, it's actually quite difficult. This is the lightest gray that I have. So you can see how much of a jump from white to this gray that we have. So we have to be extremely careful. What I'm gonna do first is the sky though. And I'm gonna start with my lightest color per usual. Now this time I'm using a chisel tip, and we'll just kind of work our way around. So it's a lot of surface area. It's going to take me a little while to do these little nooks and crannies. So the ink is going to kind of dry on me as I'm going, and drying ink is not great for trying to fade stuff. So I might try to section this off a little bit. Now the key thing when you're doing, when you're filling in a large area, it's important that your leading edge remains wet. So, for example, right now it's not too bad. But if I were to fill in right here, and I were to come back over here and just hang out here for a bit, and let this dry, and then I go back over it later, there's going to be a little bit of a line. And I don't like that because the line is, it's going to stick out, and it's a little bit hard to get rid of unless you go much, much darker. So this is still slightly wet. It's only one layer of ink. So let's just get the edge wet, okay? I don't have to go over the entire thing, but the edge is wet now. And that's good. I want the edge to be wet. No, these clouds are going to be tough. I'm worried about doing a fade. I think it's going to be really tough. Skies are pretty easy, but they're kind of long and boring sometimes, and they use a lot of ink. I go through my light blue markers pretty quickly just because of skies. And you can see it's a little patchy. Like I went a little bit darker here and here, because I just went over it more times. And since I'm using a chisel tip and not a brush tip, I'm going to have to go over it probably about twice as much to get the same color as a brush tip, because the ink probably comes out about half as fast, if I had to guess. So, and you can always kind of look back and see how the ink is drying. It's always better to apply ink to wet ink, even if it's just slightly damp. it's still just better to apply ink to wet ink. So right here, it's a little spotty. I can come over here and we just revisit everything a little bit. Why not? Go back over the spotty area. Okay, that's pretty good. Now it's hard to fade a sky that has a lot of stuff in the sky. So clouds kind of get in the way because I can't fade through the cloud. I have to go around it. Same thing with this dragon wing. Like it's gonna be hard to match. Like if I'm fading this to a darker blue up here, it's gonna be hard to fade from this area right here where my marker is to this area. It's gonna be hard to match that color because I can't just drag the marker from here to here. I have to start from scratch. So it's important that I'm kind of following along the same steps, trying to mix the markers in the same ratios if possible. All right, so we'll just do half. We'll just do half right now, the left half, and then we'll come back to the right side. See, if I try to do the right side right now, I'm afraid that this ink is going to start to dry on me. So that's why I kind of want to work that. I don't need, like these spotty areas are okay because I know I'm going over with a darker marker in a little bit. In fact, I'm going to go over that darker marker in just a second. All right, let's go to my middle marker. So that'll be this blue. Now they're pretty close, so it doesn't actually have to be that wet to mix colors that are pretty close together. So generally, when you add a darker marker, I didn't do it here, you would actually come to the darkest spot and work your way back to the light. But since these markers are so close to each other and the ink is pretty wet, it was okay for me to just kind of start right here. So I'll do everything from this area and above will be done with this mark. I'll go over with this marker. Now right now I've got a line right here. I'm going to want to work that out fairly shortly with the lighter marker. So in fact, let's go ahead and do that before it dries. Here's my lighter marker. Come back and kind of pushing into the paper with the chisel tip, because I don't have a brush tip on this marker. Yeah, you can see how that ink's starting to kind of dry, and as it dries, it gets lighter. So that's how you can kind of tell. I mean, sometimes you can physically touch the paper to see if it's wet, but if you're doing a large area that's all the same color, like the sky, for example, you can see the ink is laying up a fair bit just from it drying. So this is my second marker. So anytime you add a darker marker, you want to come back to the lightest one. Then you go to your third darkest marker, then to your second darkest. Or sorry, I'm going reverse. But you basically, every time you go darker, then you come back to your lighter colors. And you just kind of keep stepping down that ladder. Okay, that's good for this color. I see a little spotty area here. So I want to attack those spotty areas while the ink is still wet. Otherwise, I'm going to end up with lines. And so now I kind of came back in with this light marker. I'll try to go over this fade one more time, get rid of any line. I think that's pretty good. All right, now let's go with the darkest marker. So with the darkest marker, I'm going to come up to my darkest area, which will be the very top of the page. And anytime you have the darkest marker, you really don't need to add that much of it. Usually a thin line is usually enough to like kind of, shoot, which one's which? Sorry, I mixed up my markers here. Usually like a thin amount is enough to, it just kind of helps make the other colors pop a little bit. But in the case of a sky, it's going to fade into that darkest color. Sorry, I'm coming with my second darkest, And now let's go to the lightest. My second lightest. I keep mixing it up. Sorry, guys. I'm still new. I'm learning. We're experimenting. We're having fun. Okay, that's pretty good. All right, so I talked about the leading edge being wet. So this is still going to be a little bit wet. So I want to work. Basically, what I'm going to do is kind of just keep this edge wet. I'm not going to focus on it. I'm just going to keep it wet. Okay, so now I got a new wet edge. And then I'm going to come back in here and work my way up. And I'm just going to keep revisiting that and just keeping it wet. So every like 30 seconds or so, I'll come back up and touch that leading edge. I just need to touch it. I don't need to go crazy. I don't need to focus on it. And eventually the two will come together. This castle's going to be a little bit tough. Looks like there's a fair amount going on. It's tight detail. You know, when I pick my pictures, you know, I'll browse around quite a bit and try to find one that I really like, but I don't like ones that have like super fine details like this castle does. And then other times I don't like huge open areas like a sky. I kind of like something like this dragon, this Shrek, even the fire and the tiles that are just kind of moderately spaced. The artist has given me enough detail that I can clearly see what's going on, but they haven't given me so much detail that like I have no creative freedom. So I think that this artist has done a good job of just highlighting just the bare minimum and let me fill in the rest. You know, trust me to do what I'm here for. Okay, so get that edge wet again. Come back up. And get this edge wet. Trying to keep everything wet. Yeah, the brush tips are a lot nicer for applying ink. This chisel tip, I mean, I'm pushing a little bit harder. I have to go over the area a little bit more. It's a thinner marker, so it's going to run out before. I would say like I think they say like one marker, like a normal marker, not this one, lasts like 4 sheets. You can fill in 4 sheets of paper with it. This marker, you can probably fill in like 2 or 3 sheets of paper with it before it runs out of ink. And right now, since I'm going over probably a third of a sheet of paper, I'm probably going to use up, I don't know, at least 20% of this marker. So if you are planning on if you buy a big set, just know that like you're going to use some markers more than others. And sky blue is a particularly common one. And then some markers you're just not going to use at all. And then, so you can buy replacement sets, you can buy individual markers, you can buy like large sets, small sets. But just be, I guess, I mean, it obviously depends on your budget and everything. But just know try to study which marker sets come with which markers if you're trying to like save some money, but also have like a really good set. Like pastel colors, I really like the pastel sets that they have because I tend to use those light markers as blenders and really go through them a lot compared to the dark ones. But yeah, I mean, this particular color I maybe have like 2 of. I have a large set, but there are some like dark grays. I probably have like 6 black markers at least. And I almost never use the black marker. So like the darker the colors get, the less of it you use, and then as you build more sets, those darker colors just start to accumulate. You end up with a ton of them. So in other words, if you're watching this and you need some dark Ohuhu markers, just let me know, and maybe that can be a reward for watching me. Some dark marker sets. So coming back to the original, this ink has dried a little bit. It's gotten lighter. So I'm kind of just going back over, making it all a little bit more consistent. But I have to make it more consistent while it's still damp. That's important. Okay. All right, let's come in with that second marker now. So the second marker, I can kind of see the line, but I'll kind of work in this area here a little bit. Second lightest, second darkest. I guess it's my middle marker, so they're both right. I'm just gonna do like a thin, just a quick layer here. And this will help fade it up to that darkest color. Now I gotta be careful with bleeding because this is gonna go over this. Now, like I said, know your background, know your colors. What color am I gonna be doing this castle with? And chances are it's gonna be like a darker gray. I've actually already selected all my colors. And I strongly suggest picking out all your colors before you start working for a couple reasons. Number one is timing. With the ink drying, you want to, if you have like a collection of 300 or 400 markers, it can take a while to find the marker that you're looking for. And during that time, if you're in the middle of a drawing, that ink is starting to dry on you, and you want to work with wet ink. So make sure that you have your colors selected beforehand. I pick all my colors for everything before, and I set them into different piles. For example, here I've got some grays, and this is going to be for the donkey. So I've already selected these, and I have them set to the side. And then the other reason why I really like picking my markers ahead of time and separating them into groups is so I don't actually repeat the same marker. Sure, there'll be some crossover, but I like to keep my colors separated, even though some of the colors might be very, very similar, or you can combine two colors to make another one. I like to keep them all separated, and I think that just helps. It just kind of makes the page more colorful. Makes it a little bit more fun, I think. You don't have to, obviously. Like, I had borrowed one of these yellows from the fire before, but that wasn't my original intent. But sometimes you gotta use the same marker. Okay, let's go back to the lightest color and kind of fade this in over here. Fade it in by the castle. Lord Farquaad. And work my way up. Okay, now let's do the darkest color. Okay, my darkest color came to about here or so. And like I said, these colors are pretty close. It's not a huge jump in blue. And with a smaller jump in the colors, it's easier to blend, and you just don't require quite as much ink on the paper. But still, like, you're gonna want a minimum of probably 3 layers of ink, even if you're doing like a flat color, because one layer alone can get a little spotty sometimes. So if you go over it about at least 2 or 3 times while it's still wet, you kind of get a more consistent tone, less spotty. Like right here, it's a little spotty, so maybe I'll go back over that again. Actually, probably not. Maybe. All right, let's go over that one more time. I am mixing up my colors a little bit. Yeah, try to keep your colors in order from lightest to darkest, or at least just know which one's which. I'm kind of rotating my paper around quite a bit here. I hope you can see. I think I have the camera set up pretty well where my ideal drawing area is kind of like here. I think that's pretty good for where I have the camera set up. But if you think I should do it differently, let me know. Let me know which camera angle you like a little bit more. I kind of like switching the camera angles a little bit. All right, that's pretty good for the sky. All right, let's do some clouds now. All right, I'm gonna go. So. You know what I'm going to try to do? I've never really done this before. Let me grab a blender marker. Okay. And I'm just going to experiment right here on this paper. I want to know what happens if I make a puddle of the blender marker Now this isn't normal ink, okay? So now I've got a nice wet spot with that color. And then I'm going to do a gradient in this N0, so this one. And let's kind of come beneath it a little bit. Let's go to M1. Now this part isn't going to be graded. No one's going to see this. This is just a tool for me. Kind of experimenting a little bit. And I just want to know what this is going to look like when it dries up. Like, how white is it going to be? You know, let's do it with the other colors too. So here's my blender. So I can actually come back and blend it some more. And I'm curious just how white it's going to be, because I like the white of these clouds, but it's too white and it's too flat. And if I add in this gray, it just gets real gray real fast. It's really hard to do like a very light gray. It's very tough. Alright, I'm going to let this dry, so I'm going to turn off the camera and I'll switch to the other camera and then we'll do some clouds and hopefully we can get them to look real without being too dark. That'll be the goal. So I'm going to come back in a few minutes and we will continue from there. Okay, so I've let the ink dry from the blender marker a little bit, and as you can see, this actually works pretty well. So this kind of down here towards the bottom is the gray without the blender, and then you can see when it mixes in, it does turn pretty white. So I'm going to try this for the clouds. I'm just basically going to start with my blender marker and just cover it, just fill in the clouds. I might go over this twice. I'm just going to do all the clouds at once. Like I said, when you're coloring, the amount of area that you're working in is important. So if I'm working in a really large area, like a huge sky without a lot of clouds, that ink will kind of try to dry up on you by the time you do one full layer. Now if you're doing an area that's very small, and you kind of do one layer, then you go into the second layer and the third layer, well, your paper will get wet very quick. You won't really have much time to dry. And what happens there is the ink will start to bleed a little bit. It happens a lot to me when I do faces, because I use a lot of different colors when I do skins. And you know, face is relatively small, and then it tends to bleed like into the eyeballs, which are supposed to be completely white. So if you look through some of my old drawings, you'll see a lot of the eyeballs are bled into by the skin. All right, that's pretty good for that. Let's go to N0. So that'll be my lightest gray, and I'm just gonna do some kind of like swirls here a little bit. A little darker towards the bottom of the clouds. So some swirls. And sometimes you kind of gotta go with what the artist gives you. So these clouds all have kind of flat bottoms. That's okay. Let's go M1 now, and we'll just kind of keep adding in some darker areas. And we can always come back in with that blender and try and lighten things up a little bit, but since we're already dealing with pretty light colors here, there's only so much the blender can do. But I think adding the blender was a good choice beforehand. Alright, and then we'll come in with N2, which is my darkest one, and very small amounts. That's pretty good. Tell you what, let's vary up the color. This is a slightly different gray, and let's just mix this one in just here and there. Slightly different, not very. Okay, and then let's come in with the blender and just do one quick pass with the blender. I'm not gonna like saturate it. I'm just doing one quick pass that will help kind of bring everything together and lighten things up a little bit. So I think that looks pretty good. It's not monotone, but it's not sticking out too much. This one actually could use a little bit of help. I'm gonna put my darker color here at the bottom a little bit more. Get my darker ink in there. And maybe this one too. A little darker towards the bottom. And let's go darker towards the bottom on all of them. Yeah, I think that looks pretty good. Alright, let's call that good for the clouds. Let's go ahead and do the castle now. I'll just keep the camera rolling. So watch how I switch my markers. I've got this nice fancy tray that I made. I actually designed 3D printed it myself. I'm going to put all these away. And then I can go straight, if I can find it. Now I can go straight into my castle area. Now these are all grays. I'm going to start with the ground, and I selected these warm grays. Now I have not made the palette here, but these grays these are Copic markers, and the Copic marker grays tend to fade together a lot better than the Hoo-Hoo one. So as far as gray marker goes, I suggest Copic, but if you are doing just normal colors, I suggest a Hoo-Hoo because it just has so many more colors, and it's much more affordable too. Like Copic is, and you're paying like $5 a marker, but a Hoo-Hoo you're paying like, I don't know, less than $1, I think. All right, this is pretty good for the ground here. Let's start with the lightest color, per usual. I'm gonna rotate. I know I'm kind of rotating this away from you, so it's upside down for you. So if that's a problem, let me know in the comments. I don't really know a better way to do it. I mean, obviously I have my camera up above, but I'm trying to do like different camera angles so it's not just the same thing the whole time. I'm gonna go to W4. So my light source will be in the upper right. So we'll have it be darker here for sure, and maybe kind of tucked behind. You know what? I think I need to go this color for everything. This will be my base color. Yeah. Because this part isn't going to stand out very much. I mean, it's just going to be, oh, there's a pile of rocks. There's a cliff that the castle is on. And then just keeping monotone, using the lines that they give us. And we'll just go darker and darker. Maybe darker towards the bottom, darker towards the lines. And sometimes it's hard to tell what the artist intended, so you kind of just gotta go with it. So I start light and I slowly add the darker areas. I don't go straight for the darker areas. I slowly add them in. And I think it just ends up looking a little bit better. Because we're adding, as we add in those darker colors, more just one by one, getting that paper wet. And let me blend it all together. So come back in with a light marker and just blend it all together. There. That's all you really need. Maybe I can fade some of this a little bit better towards the bottom. All right, that's pretty good. All right, let's try the castle now. So let me organize my markers real fast. These are organized. They've got numbers on them. So like BG042, BG043, and I am just organizing these based on color. I'm not too worried about this castle. You know, it's just kind of in the background. But let's start off with the lightest color. I'm actually not sure. Let me just try two things real quick. Let's try out these three markers, see what they look like. Okay, there's BG42, BG50. Yeah, BG50 and 42, it's like they almost don't go together. And then that's BG60. Alright, so let's start with BG42. We'll just get everything wet. Let's go over this. Castle will be fairly simple. There's a lot of detail here that I just can't really accomplish. And the other thing I don't really like is how much detail there is, considering how far in the background this is. Usually you would expect more detailed stuff that's in the foreground instead of the background. But this artist really likes castles I wanted to add some extra detail. That's okay, we'll work with it. Okay, so I have to pace myself. If I go to, this is a small area, if I pace myself, if I go with the next marker right away, it's not going to be able to dry at all. And then everything is just going to blur together, and I won't be able to get like a very fine shadow on, say, the side of this pillar compared to the other side. I'm actually going to jump it up a couple grades. So my light source is to my upper right. Let's come over here, and you can maybe even do this like two or three different colors. Instead, like, I grab more colors than I usually need, but that's just a habit of mine. I like to have the colors ready to go. But now I'm just kind of yeah, I think I might just stick with two colors and call it a day. Maybe if there's like a couple really dark areas. Not really sure what's going on there. I think those are leaves, plants, whatever. Well, they're gray plants now. It might be a cliff, I'm not even sure. And then let me come in with a darker color, and let's just hit some of those negative highlight areas. So we got some shadow. Dark inside. Not 100% positive what's going on over here. Yeah, sometimes you're just like, what was that artist thinking? Like, what the artist intended right here? I don't even know. It happens all the time. I swear, like, when you pick a picture to draw, take a really close look at it and make sure that you think like every little part of it, you know what's going on, you know you can do it. Because sometimes the artists mess up. You'd be amazed how many of these drawings I print off, and then I realize the artist messed up. Okay, that's good for the castle. Again, it's not an attention seeker. It's not something you're really going to notice too much, but it's definitely not one color, and it's pretty obviously a castle. So at the end of the day, like, when you look at this thing, the first thing you're going to notice is the three main characters and the dragon. And the fire, you know, it's clearly a fire. It's not an amazing fire. I don't think I would not give myself an A+. I'd maybe give myself a B. But the fire isn't really what's going to grab your attention. Sure, it's orange, it's reddish, and those colors pop a little bit more. But I think it's pretty obvious that it's fire, and I think we're good from there. So let's get going. Tell you what, we'll do the dragon next. Alright, I think we're ready for the dragon. So I've selected these colors down here. I've got my eyeball, I've got my horns. The belly will be this kind of salmonish color, and then the rest of the body will be more like a pinkish, like a stronger pink and the magenta type of color. Let's just knock out the eyeballs right away. I'm going to make them green all the way through. It's yellow, green. Okay. And then for the horns, I like to use these yellow gray for like bone and horns. It usually looks pretty good. It's a very thin area that I'm working on right now, so I might only be able to sneak in two colors. Yeah, it's gonna be hard to do some shading, but I might try to shade from the center out. So maybe a little bit darker towards the head. Oh yeah, I think that looks good, because I don't think I'll really be able to shade from top to bottom. But I never really want one color. Like, I just did the eyes in one color, but they're so small, you're just not even going to notice. So now I'm coming in with that darkest color, and now I'm going to come back with the lightest one and just kind of blend them all together. Now this is a really small working area, and I just went over some of these areas 3 times. This will be the 4th one. Okay, so that ink is wet, so I gotta be real careful not to oversaturate. Otherwise, it's gonna bleed into the rest of the drawing. Okay, I think that's pretty good for this. I can always come back later and make them a little bit darker, but I don't want to go over this again. One thing you can always do is flip it over and take a look. So right now I can actually see, the horns that I just did. I can see a little bit of the eyes. And depending on how thick how wet it is, it'll come through a little bit more. And that's actually pretty wet because it came through quite a bit. Okay, so the belly is going to be, I'm going to go with this color. And then I'll hit my darker spots with this color for the belly. And then with this color for the belly for the darker spots. And then let me step it up to, I don't know if I have another dark color. I don't know if I have any of these other ones I want to use as the dark. Let me grab my colors real quick. So make yourself a swatch, like a really good swatch. So I've just gone through, I think it's R190. It's kind of the darkest one I'm looking at. So I started with R110, going to R190. I wonder if there's one that's a little bit darker that kind of goes with this color. And I'm going to say R180, R270. Did I grab that? Yes, R270. Okay, I got this right here. Let's try this. I got my 3 colors. Sorry, I know I say that I grab all my markers ahead of time, which I do, but sometimes you make little last minute decisions and you're not 100% certain what everything is going to look like. Oh, it looks like the dragon's carrying something in his mouth. Maybe it's like a chain. Oh, it must be a chain. Okay, I'll get some chain colors, some metal colors. Okay, so I went with my lightest color. I'm going to have the light source be kind of like towards the belly. So I'll have my darker areas be on the outside here. We'll kind of fade them in. Darker areas, fade them in. And then let's come in with that darkest marker. We'll start with the darkest areas and work our way to the light. Darkest areas, work our way to the light. Come back in with the lightest color, the first one, and just blend it all together. That looks pretty good. Now, there are some lines here that I can work with that I can add shadow behind, but I'm actually going to wait a little bit for this ink to dry. I want those lines to be a little bit sharper underneath those flaps, and that will definitely help if I let it dry a little bit. Okay, so I'm going to set these 3 markers to the side. All right, now let's do the dragon. Actually, you know what? I meant to do the palm as the same color. So let's make the palm that same color. Maybe just mix in a little bit of this. Prevent it from being monotone. We'll come back. All right, keeping these 3 markers to the side because I know that they go for the belly and the palms. And for everything else, I think I'm gonna start with my lightest color, which is this kind of this brightish pinkish color, and I'm just gonna make everything that color to start. Again, we start light, we end dark. So I don't expect to really see any of this color by the end, to be honest. But we're just starting it with this. Because why not? Because we can. Yeah, it's definitely not dark enough, for sure. We're getting that ink wet, getting the paper wet. I always say getting the ink wet. I don't know why. Oh well. Happy accidents. Yeah, the dragon definitely has something in its mouth. So I will come back through. Now, the ink is already bled over that, so I'll just have to use a darker gray to cover that up. That's no problem. So I gotta be careful around the eyes. Eyes, it's easy to overwork the area right around the eyes because there's typically a lot of shadows going on, so you add like a lot of different colors that there, and before you know it, you've bled through the paper and you cross the lines, and then all of a sudden your eyes look like your skin because the color is bled through. And notice how the color kind of changes as it dries. So this is fresh and wet, and this is slightly more dry. So it actually turned into a little more pinkish, lightish color. Good to be aware of. I like to turn the paper sideways when I do kind of horizontal sections. Make the horizontal sections vertical. Okay, that is very pink dragon. Let's come in with R23. Okay, so my highlights, I'll have the flame be kind of like the main source of light. So we'll come underneath here. And then we'll have skylight too. So I'll try to mix two different light sources. The fire towards the belly. And then the sky, the sun, will be kind of in my upper right. And I'll try to work with that too. So it'll be a little bit darker on the left side of the dragon, ideally. But the belly will remain about the same. Not really sure what's going on up here. For the face, come underneath, come underneath. And I'm just starting with the areas that I know are going to be darkest. And it's just easiest to do that. And it kind of helps you when you color it that way. So we'll go a little bit lighter there, darker on the outside here. Okay, it'll definitely be dark underneath the wing and on the bottom edge of the wing. I actually don't want to work too fast right now. These are thin areas where the lines are kind of close together. And I want to have definition. And have definition, more definition, you're going to need the paper to be slightly drier. Okay, so there's that. I'm going to go in order here. Which one's Holly Shock? Let's try this one. You can always come to a darkest area, so I think right underneath the wing is going to probably be my darkest area. So like whenever I add a new color, it's pretty safe to go there. I'm not even sure which color I'm adding. And then like if your markers get a little mixed up, you know, I'm just going to go over the light areas with this one. I like this one a little bit more. Not quite as bright as that first pink. Yeah, that looks nice. Okay, let's see what this color is. I got them mixed up a little bit. All right, we'll go, this is a slightly darker pinkish color. And just working my dark areas. His wings will definitely be a lot darker. Because the sunlight is underneath the wings. Or we're seeing the bottom side of the wings, I should say. And let's come over here. We got some shadows. Shadows underneath. No, I don't think that deserves to be lit up. Now let's try R1. Add a little bit of red to it. Just a touch red. If I don't like this is still, there's still darker colors, so I can always go darker still. So I'm still kind of in an experimental phase where I'm allowed to experiment a little bit, not much, but a little bit. Because I can always still go a little bit darker. But once I start adding in the next colors, then it's a little bit too late. So I'm gonna go back to a lighter color and go over this. Shoot, you know what? That just got real messed up. That's okay. We can go lighter. Grab a lighter marker, use a chisel tip, and really dig in there. Then come and grab your bleach marker, your eraser, blender, whatever it's called. There, that's pretty good. All right, let's add in some darker colors here. I don't like that red I just did. I might just make the whole dragon a little bit darker. Oh, this is not looking good. Let's come back to a light color. Bring this all together. Line up certain areas of it. And I feel like I'm about to damage the paper actually. So I gotta be careful using this these felt tips. Alright, let's go to R18. Let's go right underneath the wing. So darkest area is going to be right underneath. This is a very dark marker. Not super dark, but much darker than the other ones. We'll add highlight here, here, and then this, since we're stepping it up so much darker, we're going to need, we've got wet ink. The paper is very nice and wet for us, but I'm going to want to kind of fade this a little bit. I do like little squigglies instead of just like a flat line. I find that the fade just looks a little bit better when I do it that way. All right, let's come to dark pink. And let's just go over this, the whole thing. Try to bring these colors together a little bit more. Yeah, you can see the difference between this wing and this wing now, just from using a lighter color to kind of mix things together. It's always good to kind of compare and see what kind of differences you can make, if you can. Oops, I kind of went over into the sky a little bit. That's okay. All right, let's come back with this really dark one. And that'll be like our reverse highlight. The dragon's good. Could use a little bit more shadow, I think, on the face. So I'm going to come in with this darker marker and we'll work up the shadow. Add to the nostrils. And come back in with a dark pink and work this back in. Get rid of that line. Just fade it all together. I'm not super happy with this dragon face. Faces are tough. They really are. We've got kind of a mask here going. I'm going to go with R1 and let's highlight that mask and make it red. Let's make the face a little bit more red. Maybe make everything more red. I don't know. That's a pretty red face. Jeez, if I go over this anymore, I might kind of ruin it a little bit. It's that really dark one. So, really want to attack that dark marker while it's like fresh and wet. I don't want to let it dry at all. So I just work it in with a medium color. Oh, guys, I should just quit coloring forever. I shouldn't have gone over this with that dark red. You know, let's just go in with the blender. See, now I've gone over the face a million times, and it's starting to kind of become mud, sort of. And I'm just gonna lighten it up with this highlighter marker. And maybe we'll just call that a day. Oh, that face looks so bad. Oh my gosh. Ugh. Now I'm just like desperately grabbing different markers and hoping I can bring the color back. Top of these wings could use a little bit of help. Screw it, I'm just making everything else darker. See, I went too dark with the face. Now I'm just making everything else darker to correct for it. Gotta hit some highlights here. Let's see, I can just go to, I just randomly grabbed a marker. I think I know which one it is, but I'm just gonna add it to like a darker area and just see what it looks like. If it's not the marker I want, that's fine, because I've added to a darker area, so it's like I can make it go away. But right now my paper is very, very wet. I bet you if we flip it over, it's very see-through. So if I'm going to do any more work on this, I might have to wait, which I'm going to. I'm going to go back over the hand since I haven't hit the hand in a while, so that's pretty dry. Maybe hit the belly again, because I haven't hit the belly in a while. Okay, I think that's pretty good. I'm going to call that good. Okay, now I'm going to do donkey. So I've picked out actually quite a few colors here. I've got two different types of gray. You know, just because I picked all these colors doesn't mean I need to use all of them. I'll probably go with this, it's called T1, T2, and this one's a little bit of a CG, which is like a cold gray. These colors kind of go well with like, one is literally called gray wolf hair, so that'll go really well with donkey. And then these colors are kind of for like the face. There's like, you know, his lips and maybe his ears a little bit. And then these colors, these yellows and oranges, will be kind of like a reflection of the fire. So per usual, let's go ahead and get started with our lighter colors. I realize for the camera angle, I will try to keep this about right here. Okay, let's get everything wet with my lightest gray. And yeah, so I just gotta be careful because the background is gonna be, you know, the background's this fire color, so you gotta be really careful not to go over the lines. If I went over with this marker, it wouldn't be a big deal, but once I get into these darker grays, it probably will make a difference. So just, I mean, you should never go outside the lines anyway, but it's good to know when and where you can make mistakes, and how you can make mistakes, and how you can kind of pick yourself back up from a mistake, like how you can correct a mistake and maybe even turn a mistake into, you know, something that works really well for you. So I've got an image of Donkey up on my computer screen over here, which you can't see, and he kind of like, his belly is more like these grayish colors, and then like the sides of his body are more like these grayish. So I'm gonna come in with the side. I'm gonna keep working this marker right now, and we'll kind of work this side. But once we get to the belly, the gray tone kind of changes a bit. Because this color, the color that I have going right now is a little bit too light. But that's okay, we're just getting the paper wet. Let's see. And, let's see, he's got... Okay, that's good for that. And maybe one more step up in this gray. Just hit some shadow, some areas I think might be a little bit darker. Just to get some shadows starting to get going. And it just, like, as I add these minor shadows, it kind of helps me. Like, I'm basically shading it very lightly with light colored markers. And then I can decide, oh, that shadow makes sense, so I'll keep it. I'll make it darker with a darker marker on the next pass. Or that shadow doesn't really make sense. Oh, I skipped this area. Oops, no. or that shadow doesn't make sense, but you can correct it because you're still kind of light. So right now I'm figuring out like the dimensions, like how dimensional, how 3D it is. Shoot, should not have gone with that color. Oh well. All right, let's work in this cold gray into the belly. So I'm working two different types of gray here. So the belly will be more this cold gray. And his face will have the cold gray kind of like on the side, I think. Again, I'm kind of looking at an image. And then I think his ears will be kind of this cold gray as well. Okay, paper's nice and wet. You can always take a look at the other side and see, we're getting wet. We're making progress. Alright, let's go to T4. Working some more shadows here a little bit. Some shadows. And you know what? I'm going to come to these grayish colors. So now that I've got some grays kind of down and some shadows down, I think I've got enough that I can kind of start. I'm going to start adding the colors in. So we'll go with this gray wolf hair, and I might just do the whole. I'm probably going to avoid the belly area, but it might be a good transition color. So it's like it's got a tint of brown to it. But yeah, that looks good. So kind of transitioning from the belly to the sides of the face and stuff with this color. And it just gives me a little bit of brown. I don't want to be purely gray tone, because Donkey has some brown to him. It's mostly gray, but he has brown. Okay, that's pretty good. Let me try this further color of skin. So we can always grab another marker. I'll just go to a spot that I think is going to be dark, and we'll just kind of see if this really makes a difference, if anything. Is it going lighter? Is it going darker? I think that goes well with the light spots, actually. Maybe a little bit. Worst case, we're just adding little bits of, even if it's like kind of the same tone, we're not really going to see it. I'm still just adding little bits and pieces of that color in, and we'll end up seeing like a variety, much larger variety of colors in the very end. Alright, coming in with my cool gray, kind of for the darker areas a little bit. Yeah, we're already getting pretty dark. Let's try a CG40. Alright, the paper's getting pretty wet. I can already see, I'm using the chisel tip because some of these markers don't have the brush tip, and I can already see that I'm damaging the paper. Alright, let me come in with the highlight color. So the reflection of the flame off his face. So let's come in with the yellow. Off here, off the side, off at the back of his arm, back of his arm, back of his leg, and let's hit it with the orangish one too. That looks pretty good. Maybe a touch up here. And on the side of his face too, and maybe the side of his neck. Yeah, I'm liking that. Alright, let me come back in with T2 and kind of blend in the side a little bit. Blend in the face. Alright, let's go for the ears. Let's add some color to the face. So I'm going to go with this kind of bright pinkish and add some color to the ear here. But I might have gone too dark. And then let's add some brown, like some of this pinkish around his face too. This face has a little bit of color. And maybe a touch around the eyes. And maybe I just want to have a little bit of this color throughout the rest of it. Not much, but just enough that it's so the face isn't completely different from the rest of the body. Boy, that paper's pretty wet. Alright, I'm going to do the dark areas. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to grab a highlighter marker. And we'll come in and we'll hit the belly here. Because I want this belly to look pretty white. I need some more highlights. Come in here. Highlight the back, which is showing the reflection of the fire. Side of the neck. Side of the face. And this is really, yeah, this is doing a good job of taking out all those little patchy things. Sometimes the paper gets a little patchy. If you work it too fast, I'm working the small area kind of fast, and normally I wouldn't be going this quick, but since I'm on the camera, I don't want you sitting around watching ink dry, which would be the most boring YouTube video of all time. Alright, let's go back into the feet. Let me grab a dark gray. I'm going to use, this is one of the few times I'm going to use the fine tip. I almost never use this because you can't really blend with it. But it's good for really small areas and doing things in monotone. And I'm not even sure if this is the right color that I want. That's pretty good. His hair is kind of this color too, off the top of his head, and we'll say his eyebrows are as well. Let's go a step darker on the bottom of his foot here. Let's add some personality into his hair. Come back up. That's not bad. You know, the paper's just so wet right now. It's got a little reflection going in this tail. Yeah, maybe I added a little bit too much reflection color. This still looks pretty good. Let me lighten this area up a little bit. I'm damaging the paper now. Yeah, maybe just lighten up the whole thing. These blender markers are amazing. They really are. At first, like when I first got into coloring, I never used it. I was like, an eraser marker or a blend? I can blend it with the normal colors, and you can blend it with the normal colors, but you can't really lighten it up with the normal colors too much. This helps you lighten things up. Just gotta be careful. Oh yeah, that looks so much better. Just look how much of a difference that is. If you're watching this, rewind like a minute and look at Donkey compared to what he looks like now. He looks so much better now. Wow. Alright, that'll be good for Donkey. Oh, you know what? I missed a spot. Let's go T5 on the bottom of his foot here. Let's make that leg a little bit darker. And oh, what the heck. Yeah, this paper is really wet. So I'm pretty satisfied with the way he looks. If I were to continue on this, I think I would need to let him dry. I would step away for a couple minutes, let him dry. You can see it's pretty wet. I can actually feel it wet on the other side. So, like I said, when you work with these smaller areas and you just do one layer, then the second layer, one layer after another, it's easy to overlayer it. So, you just gotta be careful, depending on the size of what you're working on. Alright, let's do Fiona next. Alright, now let's do Fiona. So I've selected these markers right here. We got these two, this gold and this green is for the dress. Our hair is this bright red, which hopefully we can cover up this this overlap right here from the fire. And I've got some skin colors out. So I think what I'm going to do, since I've been working in a small area, and I'm going to try to learn from my mistakes from like Donkey and the face of the dragon, is that I don't want to go too fast in one particular area. So I'm going to start with the skin. I'm going to do like 2 layers. Then I'm going to go to like the dress, and then, you know, I'll come back to the skin a little bit later. So maybe I'm trying something a little bit different here. So let's grab R18, my lightest skin color. This is a really good for, R18 is like one of the best ones for you know, Caucasian skin. Just has a nice tone to it. And let's see, and we got her legs are exposed too. This marker's running out of ink. Shoot. Oh, well, I don't need that much of it. Okay, so we got this going. And let me add, let's try R20. Which one's R20? R20 is this one. And we'll just throw in some shadows here. So the shadow will be, the light will come from behind her a little bit. We'll have some shadow here, above her eye, above her face, this side of her hand, on this side of the palm. For the legs, maybe underneath, behind the dress, a little bit more. I think that's pretty good like that. And you know what? Let's go with one more shade. We'll go with this darker one. And we're just hitting those dark spots. And then I'll come back in with that first color, and we'll just kind of try to blend together what we have. R18. And I'm going to blend it with the broadside. This is more like this kind of like forcing your way. Like the broadside is really, you're like attacking the ink almost. It's good for blending, especially when you don't have a ton of ink down. That's actually not bad for the skin itself. You know what? While I'm here, how wet is that ink? So you can take a look at the other side. Yeah, it's getting through, but it's not too bad. Let me try this color. I'll just try a little bit on the lips. Go a little bit more here. The side of her hand. And that might have been a little bit too dark. That's okay. We'll come back in with the light. And then we'll just make it lighter because we got the wet ink, so we can make it lighter. When you're doing that, you're kind of blurring everything together. So, which is good and bad. Depends on how much of a fade you want. And does she have any reflection? You know what? I'm going to add a little bit of this yellowish color to show a reflection of the yellow of the fire in her skin. So maybe like on the side of her face here. And let's try this little bit of orangish color that I have too. Yeah, I think I like that orange more for the reflection. And let's come back in and maybe try to blur that just a little bit. Get like a yellowish, beigeish color. That's tough. Skin is so tough. Alright, go and let the skin dry. I can add more shadows later. Let's try doing that. It's a smaller area, so sometimes you want to wait on dry paper just because it gives you finer lines and it doesn't like bleed out as much. So if you're dealing with like a really tight space and you just don't have room to bleed out, then you might want to let the ink dry a little bit. Alright, let's come in here, do this gold. See, I have bleeding ink. I grabbed 2 markers here. I always grab at least 2 markers. For like pretty much anything, I always grab at least 2 markers. And at least that just prevents me from being monotone. So I can do a lot with 2 markers. You know, a lot of these shadings, I'm grabbing 5 markers, but you can actually do quite a bit with just 2. But with 1 marker, you can't do anything. So grab yourself a second marker. All right, let's do the dress now. Her shoes are also green, so I'm grabbing my highlight color here. And just, per usual, getting things wet. Trying to avoid the colors that I just went through. And there's a lot of little tight spaces, but just gotta be extra careful. I'm not even worrying about the underside of the dress. It's going to get so much darker underneath there. Like right here where my marker is, it's going to be kind of a bright area. And right here. Okay, so this is a good blender marker. I'll just do the whole, oh, here we go, shoe. And I'll just keep it consistent. So I'll do that part of the dress too, even though it's going to get way, way darker. Alright, try to keep my markers in order. Let's go to the next green, which is, this is intended to be my base color. I think this one goes pretty well with everything there. And yeah, that's pretty good. Honestly, now I'm just kind of going over the whole thing. I think this color is a lot better. See, I just start with that light one. It's just comforting to start with a color that, knowing that I can make a mistake and like it just won't matter because I'm going to go over it again anyway, and I'm really just getting the paper wet. So that's all you're really doing with that first color, is just helping yourself out. It's not really going to show up in the final result at all. It's just creating a tool for yourself. Alright, let's just work in the darker colors and then we'll work in the highlights. So, grabbing a darker marker, always come to the darkest spot first, which will be underneath the dress. Okay. Underneath here, underneath the shoe, which will probably I'll probably end up making under the shoe black or like a dark gray. Let's see. So I got my fire from behind. So we'll go underneath, go shadow underneath. Armpits are usually a pretty dark area too. We'll just make this whole front of her body that darker color. She's kind of leaned over a little bit, and then it kind of dips down a little bit. And maybe on the other side of this, it's a little bit darker. Okay, that's pretty good. All right, let's step it up another dark marker. Those two markers I just did were pretty close, so I'm not too worried about blending them right now. If it were a big step up, like a big change, then I would definitely want to go back and blend them together. But I don't think that's necessary right now. All right, let's come in with this. This is my second darkest marker, or third lightest. And now we're really attacking the dark spots. Now this will really show up in the final result, so now I gotta be a little bit more careful. A little bit goes a long way. We can always add more, right? Always come back and add a little bit more. All right, let's go back in with that first bright green, not the first color, but the second color, and we'll just kind of blur things together a little bit. And let's go in with that darkest green, and let's attack the really, really dark areas first. And we'll go underneath here, and then right away, while it's still wet, I'm attacking with that next darkest marker, or the next lightest one, I should say. And I'm really trying to work out that line because I got a little bit of a fade line, a little bit of a line there. So I'm really going to try to work that out. But it's easy because I've already gone over this a few times, so the paper's nice and wet. So it's really not that hard to blur it out. But if I had like started with that, you know, if I had gone for this color right away, it would be really tough to fade away. Let's make her belly a little bit darker. Maybe a tiny bit of cleavage. Okay, I went a little too dark with the belly, so I'm coming with a lighter color. And kind of blend that together. Again, we're gonna go try to make this a little bit lighter up here. And then now what I want to do is try to add some of those highlights, those kind of yellowish, orangish highlights. And we'll see if we can make any difference here. So we can see the reflection of the fire. Oh, I forgot to do her shoe. That'll do. Notice that I'm using a yellow marker and wet green paper, so the tip of it is actually getting a little bit yellow, but it doesn't ruin the tip. It'll contaminate it for maybe a couple strokes, but it really doesn't ruin the tip at all. So don't worry about dipping like a yellow into like a dark red or dark brown or whatever, or even black. That's pretty good. Let's grab that orangish one, work it a little bit more. I might have gone a little too much there. And one more time with the green, that lightest green. Not the first green, not the highlighter green, but the lightest green. Alright, I think that is good for her dress. Let's do the hair. So I'll start with my lightest color. Her hair is very bright red. Oh, and she's wearing a crown. You know, I'm going to give her like a yellow for the crown. It's going to blend in with the background real well. So I'm just going to keep this one monotone. I don't think anyone's going to notice. And you really got to think about like what people are going to see first. You know, I kind of saved the most important things for last for a couple reasons. Number one, I'm kind of getting warmed up with everything else. But number two, it kind of helps me determine how much contrast I'm going to need. If I had started with Shrek, I'm not sure how light of a green I need to start with and how dark of a green I need to end with. But it's more obvious when I have surrounding colors. So I like to do everything else first. Even though, you know, if I screw up Shrek, I would like to do it at the very, very beginning because it's the most important part. But, you know, it's just the best strategy. You gotta have confidence in yourself. All right, let's add in this. Let's go a step darker with this red. And this is pretty thin, so I just don't have a ton of space to work with here. Go another shade of red darker. I might not be able to do very much shading here, but I'll try to do a little bit at least. I've got this wine red, so I at least know like underneath, kind of back here will be a little bit darker. Maybe on the part of the braid. And maybe like over here a little bit. Okay, now I'm coming back in with that lightest color because I just went a little bit too dark. And I'm basically just going to try to fade it all together. Oh no, I went into her skin. Okay. See, I do this a lot. Ah, shoot, I screwed up. That's okay. Let's see if I can grab a skin color and kind of work that out. So I got my R18. Oh my gosh, it came right, look at that. Pretty much came right out. But now I'm damaging the paper a little bit. Just keep it consistent. Oh, now her face is very bland. Oh, jeez. All right, let's come in with this R18. 20. Let's get our 26. More like a honey color. And just shadow in the front of her face a little bit. And then that is slightly too dark. So I'll try to work that out again. Yeah, her face is just becoming monotone. But it's just so small. It's just hard to work with. Okay, so Fiona's skin, not the best in the world. I'm telling you, skin is tough in a tight area. You really want like a big face, like this, you know, like this big. But I think that's going to be good for Fiona. Let's go to Shrek next. Alright, let's get going on Shrek. There's a couple different sections of him. We've got his pants. His shoes are kind of like this darker brownish color, or these brownish colors right here, not too dark. His vest is like this very dark color, so I selected these browns. For his shirts, it's kind of like it's like a grayish, donkey-ish color. It's very similar to Donkey. I'm going to try to keep the colors a little bit separated. And then his skin is obviously green, which is what these are for. So let's get going with the pants and the shoes. I might select. So I've got this color that's a bit more red to it, and I might make that the shoes. I want them to be similar, but I want them to be different at the same time. So I'm gonna give them the same base color, which will be the second one right here. I try to put them in order from lightest to darkest, but sometimes they get a little bit out of order, but that's okay. As long as I kind of keep track of where everything is. So, and there might even be a little bit, you know what, we might, tell you what, let's add a little bit of green into the pants. Let's do like a brownish, greenish color for the pants, and then let's leave the shoes just pure brown. No green in them. So let's come over here. So I just selected that brown. Let's go with, always start light. So I'm gonna go with, let's try this one out. See what happens when I mix this into the pants. Now the ink is wet. There's only one layer of ink down, so it's not super wet, but it's still wet, so I can saturate it. Oh, that actually looks pretty nice. Okay. Have to go over it a few times because I'm coming in to a darker color with a lighter color. Oh yeah, that looks real nice. Really making the screen now, because I like it. I mean, you just kind of work on the go. You can try adding small amounts of new colors in there. Oh, you see I oversaturated it already. Yeah, that's why you generally start with a layer marker and work your way darker, because you just do layer by layer. I'm going to let that dry just a little bit. Let's come back to the shoes over here. Let me get the shoes wet again with that original brown. Okay, now let's come to the next brown, which I think is a little bit darker. And I'm gonna have my light, again, we'll do the lights kind of like on the side because of the fire. And then maybe we'll throw in a little reflection too. So I'll tell you what, let's try throwing in a reflection now. So I've got my original highlight color. These are kind of my fire colors that I've been using. And let's just see what happens if we throw in some orange here. Oh yeah, that looks nice. The orange mixes well with this dark brown. But now I got some lines I don't really care for, so I'm gonna try to work those out. Let's see what happens if I add this orange too. Okay, that's pretty good. Let's try to blend that back in with the original brown. So I'm not going to the darkest brown yet. I'm going back to that original brown. And honestly, something like this is pretty simple, but it's probably good enough for the shoes. I might come in and just do a line underneath the brim of his shoes. But I would say that actually looks pretty good to me. You're not going to notice it. Your attention is going to be straight on a Shrek and a Shrek's face alone. Alright, let's come back in. Let's go back to the pants. Still kind of wet. Yeah, it's still actually pretty wet. Tell you what, let's do the jacket, the vest. So the vest, I'm going to use these darker colors right here. And I'm going to start with my dark brown. Actually, you know what? I'm going to start with one of these. I'm going to borrow that same color I just used for the dark colors here. The dark color marker will be my light color marker for the vest, because the vest is so much darker. And let's see, just trying to follow along here. So that's part of the shirt. And I might hit this with the highlight right away, just because the ink is wet and I want to hit it when it's wet. And as you see, we'll follow this along. We'll see how long this takes to dry. I mean, I probably put down like 5-6 layers onto that. So that could take a little while to dry. I can still feel that it's kind of wet, but it's definitely drier than it was just a moment ago. I really need to time this out. I really want to know like exactly how long it takes to dry per layer. Like if I put down 3 layers, how long does it take compared to 4 layers, compared to 5 layers, and so on. Okay. All right, let's go with the darker, you know, let's go into the darker brown. vest should be pretty straightforward. We got some lines here. Those lines that they provide kind of disappear on you when you go with the really dark colors. Alright, let's go with a light. Let's go with one of those yellows that I selected at first. And we'll kind of try to highlight some of the outsides. So I'm able to make this lighter just simply because the ink is wet. If I had let that ink dry and then I came back and tried to do this, it would not work like at all. Really gotta hit the dark inks when they're wet if you're gonna try to line them up like big time. Okay, that's pretty good. Let's hit it with a yellow on the shoulder. Really make that light. And, you know, I'm looking at a reference drawing, and the reference drawing has it really dark, and I don't need to go that dark. Like, no one's gonna pull out their phone and be like, Shrek's vest was slightly darker than this in the movie, so I think you did a terrible job. Like, no one's gonna do that. So I'm coming with a darker color. This might be a little bit on the dark side, but we will blend that back into this with the original brown. Blend it back up. Yeah, and I bled a little bit into where the shirt's going to be and slightly into his face. But I'm really rushing these just because I'm on camera. I would normally be going just slightly slower. Alright, let's return back to these pants. Let's go with the original color and let's just go over it real fast. I do like that color. Now let's add some shadow. So underneath his shirt we'll get some shadow, and then maybe like in front of his legs, underneath his knee. And then the back part can be lit up a little bit from the fire. And you know, let's throw in a little bit of this reddish brownish color. Now it's a little too brown. So I'm gonna come in with one of those greens, this yellowish color, and try to hit some highlights here. I kind of just arbitrarily just chose this marker. I actually didn't use this marker yet before, but it's much lighter, so I can just kind of use it as a blender. And it won't really change the color. Like, it wouldn't really matter if I use this color or if I use like one of these other light green. Like all these, look at the caps, I mean all of them are slightly lighter. It's all these colors right here. I can pretty much use any of them to mix it. Go back in, try to fade this away. And you know what? It's a little too close back to the shoe. So I'm gonna make the shoe slightly darker. I'm gonna go with this maroon color. This has got a slightly different tint to it as well. And let's hit the highlight here with the orange. That's not bad. Still kind of working out this. Just keep coming back and forth. Let it dry if you have to. Okay, that's pretty good. Let's do the shirt now. For the shirt, I'm going to use these colors right here. Probably avoid that second one, and I'm going to start with the third one, which is kind of this grayish color. Very similar to the donkey color. So I'll use these. I really like these three colors. I think they go very well together. Which should be 1, 3, and 4. Oh, I almost forgot his belt. His belt is brown. Which comes along right here. Now normally I would let this, I'm only doing one layer of that belt. It might be a good idea to let it dry before, even getting close to it with this marker, which I will in a minute. But I'll do other parts of his body before I get by the belt. So let's try to establish some color first before we start doing the shading. So coming here, yeah, I went over the shirt a little bit. And you won't notice it too much, but it still is noticeable. But I mean, if you look closely at any piece of art, you're gonna find mistakes. And you know, that's just part of it. And it's kind of fun, you know, you make mistakes, and it's, hey, what can I do with this mistake to make it better, to actually make it work into my drawing? And there are things that we can do to reduce the risk, like working on wet ink, for example, starting with light colors. Even have a practice sheet, you know, like what I really like about printing, you know, finding a PDF and then printing it off. Oh shoot, it looks like it kind of bled through into the brown. You know what? I think I carried it over from back here. So what I'm gonna do is just shoot. It's all right. Okay, that's good for this. Let's add in this color. So this one's kind of a little bit darker. So I'll tell you what, I'm gonna try to hit. I'm gonna use this color kind of like as if I'm shading it a little bit, even though I'm really not. I'm just kind of changing the color. So the color's gonna change a little bit in the light. And I'll do it slightly unevenly, and that will kind of give us a non-monotone. I'm not really sure what the word is I'm looking for. A variety in color. And let's try this one. Is this the original one I just did? Yeah, that's the original one. And this one, shoot, which one's which? Further color skin? Yeah, whatever. They'll get blended together anyway. Shoot, I just did a rookie mistake and mixed up my markers. I don't remember which one was the first one. That's okay. They're pretty similar. And I don't have like a set destined color in mind. I just have like a range of colors. I just want it to be between this and that. Between this gray and that brown. I want it to be between those two things. And then between this level of darkness and that level of darkness. Alright, so it's going to be a little bit darker in the front here. So let's start to add in, tell you what, let's add some highlight colors to the side. And we'll blend these in. Come on, orange. Yeah, I think that looks pretty nice. I think we need a little bit more shade up front. I'm not sure the best color for that. I think the lye color is the darkest one. All right, so if I come back in with the lye color, will that make a difference? I don't know. We'll find out. Oops. And I might come in with a warm gray. I actually don't have the warm gray here. I've got them conveniently right next to me. And let's try a warm gray 5. These are Copic markers. And I'm going to come into his belly, because I think this is going to be kind of the darkest area, and work my way out. So as he's running from the light, the darkness will be on his belly, which is furthest away from the light. Yeah, that looks pretty good. Okay, so this is a W gray 5. We'll go W gray 6 a little bit more in the middle. And underneath his hand, underneath the belt. And then let's go to W gray 4 and 3, which I have right here, and work this into the lighter area. Now, since I put this gray down, I want to hit it. I want to hit most areas with this gray. Now, this is my lightest gray. So I can try to really push down and try to hit some of these highlight areas. Even though we kind of already hit the highlight with the orange, but it'll just kind of come together. Okay, that's good for that. Next, let's go on to the skin. I'm going to switch cameras for this. Alright, let's finish up with Shrek's skin and his eyes. So I've got this brown marker. So I selected all of these right here for his skin. I'm just going to color in the eyes real quick. This brownish color is fine. I'm just using one color because it's such a small area. That'll do. I'll try to keep the whites of his eyes just in the paper itself. So I'll have to really avoid trying to bleed the markers a little bit. As far as his lips go, his lips have like a tint of red to them. So I'm gonna grab this marker and just kind of go over it. It has like a kind of like it's skin color, and that should be good. And then his ears might have a little bit of brown as well. This color, so I'll just use that color again. All right, let's get going here. As I've kind of now I'm going to learn from my mistakes. Like on Fiona and Donkey, I think I did too many layers. So I'm going to jump into this third color here. Let me make sure I got the right marker. And we'll just do our base color with this. Everything nice and wet. Okay. Avoiding his eyes. His eyebrows are a brownish color. Actually, I'll just use that same brown for his eyebrows. I'll just do this real quick. Alright. Back in with my green. Now the lips are kind of wet, so I gotta be careful not to go over them. If it were dry, I could just go right over it. But since it's not, if I went over it, it would start to blur it and kind of smear it all together, which is what I do not want at this moment. So just be aware. Same thing with the eyebrows right now. I could have gone over that if they were dry, but they are not. Okay, so this is a good base color, I think. Yeah, I think we'll actually, you know what, I'm going to try to keep some of the skin to this color. I think this color is actually pretty good. But let's go one darker. Let's get it wet again, keep it wet. Let's go one darker. Let's try this marker here. So I come to a darkest spot, so I'll say, like, this darkest spot will be right underneath his chin and in his neck. Maybe underneath his lips. So we'll have the light on the side again, underneath his nose itself, underneath his eyes a little bit, his jowls, or I think it's called jowls. So his hands come underneath. And I think his backhand will probably be pretty uniform in color. There won't be a lot of shading there. Let's try this marker. So come to the darkest area, see what happens. I'm not noticing a big difference with this one, but I'm just going to work it in anyway. Actually, that color is pretty nice. Work it into the sides here. Above the eye. Yeah, I'm starting to bleed into the eye already. Okay, ears. Alright, let me come in with that one of those highlight colors for the fire. And I've actually just misplaced my marker, but that's okay because the ink is actually a little bit wet. Where did I put that? I didn't put it away. It's unlike me. Alright, here it is. Okay. So I'm going to do some of this yellow. Oh no, that's way too bright. But I made a mistake, and I've got to commit to it, okay? So I'm going to stick with this mistake, but I'm going to work with it while it's still wet. Got that. Let's come to this yellow. Use this yellow to kind of fade it a little bit. And then I'll tackle it back with the green, I think. Maybe not. I might not have to. That looks pretty good. Let's highlight the fingers, the hands and the fingers too. Come in with our yellow again and just try to blend this. Okay. Backhand is dark, but that's fine. Alright, let's come in with GY5. So we'll go underneath the chin, because that's my darkest spot. Oh yeah, that looks nice. Go all the way around this. Underneath the chin. Underneath the nose. The nose itself, a little bit above the eyes. Maybe a tiny bit up onto the forehead. And a little bit of the jowls too. Oh yeah. Yeah, he looks kind of scary now, doesn't he? And then let's try to work this back in. I'm gonna grab a lighter color. And we'll just try working it back up. Get rid of some of those lines. Make it just blur the shadow a little bit more. Just using a lighter color, these greenish, yellowish colors, and just kind of blurring it together. There we go. Blur that together, and then just use it over here too, and blur that together. And you know what? Let's go one darker. Let's go GY43, and that's actually a little bit on the green side for me. So I don't know if I like that. Let's come back in with GY5. This time I'm going to use the broad side, and I'm going to try to work it out. So I'm basically pushing that ink into the paper where you can't see it. Like you're literally pushing the ink. And I'm just going to try to work out this color that I just added because I don't really like it that much. But now you see it's a little bit different from everything else. So I think what I need to do is add a touch of this here and here and here and here and here. And now, because I got to stick with that mistake. I got to stick with it. And I'm going to come in with that previous marker and just try to work it in. Okay, that's a little bit on the dark side still. So let's come into one of my lighter colors and let's just blend it all together. Try to work it out. So it was a mistake. In this case, I don't think it was a happy accident. I don't think it improved, but I don't think it hurt us that much either. So try to work out some of that shadow. Really try to change this color back. See, that's what I'm talking about with these dark colors. Like, just a little bit can make a huge difference. Working it over here. I get some ink on that paper, or on the tip, and just blend it all together. And even going across the face here, I probably shouldn't do that, but I think it's okay. And I think that we are going to call this one good. So I give myself a B. You know, you have to be your own worst critic, but at first glance it actually looks pretty good. The fire, yeah, the fire was tough. You know, I think the fire, at least in the poster, is a much brighter yellowish color, and it's hard to capture that. You know, the dragon, I think, came out fairly well. The face needs a little bit of help. I think all the faces need a little bit of help. But but it's not bad. I like how the tiles kind of reflect. I think the tiles came out probably the best of anything. I think they do a good job reflecting the fire. And then we just have a nice simple fade for the sky, very solid. And then the clouds, you know, they don't grab your attention, but they don't stick out. They're not monotone, but they're clearly white. And then just the castle is fine. So I'm gonna call it there. So thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next video.